And Bryce, let's take it away.
All right, we're hopping into Lobby B featuring Chess Mage, who was able to get that win. I hopped into their LoL chest to see what they played, and it looked like it was a Executioner KO strategy. In fact, 2 players had chosen Executioners in that lobby. It was Spencer in 3rd place and Chess Mage in 1st. DQA was able to get 2nd with a double 2-star Tryndamere carry, nice. Featuring 6 Slayers. It's nice to see 6 Slayers making that comeback, as yesterday was a very poor performance for anybody that wins 6 Slayers. And then Kiyun able to get that Dragon Soul Shyvana build online for that top 4. The one X factor is Aegon, who seems to be relentlessly going for Tristana 3-star every single game, Bryce. And guess what? Last game, Aegon had that 3-star Tristana reroll with Sivir and the rest of the gang, but only landed in 5th place.
Yeah, it's hard to know in these reroll situations, Dan, like when did he hit it, right? When did he come online? So it's hard to pass judgment on it. Aegon has been very consistent with that. And you know what? I'm being unfair to Aegon. I'm talking about Valet being, the most narrow player in the field. Aegon is the most narrow player in the field, Dan. He would really like to have a Tristana 3 every game. And when he's not having that, it's purely because the game is really being kind of rude to him and not giving him enough Tristanas, right? So he's got to go in a different direction, play Sivir or something like that. We are on Chess Mage's board. We've talked a little bit so far, Dan, about the kind of old school versus new school of TFT, right? You've already had a couple of the giants of old school, Grand Vice and Soju, get eliminated on day 1. Meanwhile, most of the main new school players are still alive. Setsuko, a disappointing finish yesterday and losing on the tiebreaker and getting eliminated. But you've got Chess Mage, you've got DQA, you've got Spencer, all in this lobby, and I believe that was last game's top 3, Dan. So where do you stand on this debate? Do you want North America to be represented by the young guns or the tried and true, top players in North America?
I want a little bit of both. I feel like we have more spots now, so we should absolutely have more of that diversity represented. I love a little bit of that old guard. I guess in this case it'd be players like Kuramax and Kiting and Kiyun, kind of in that, and Sox, of course. But I'd also love to see Bertosaurus and Spencer and DQA, and maybe even some of these, we still have open bracket players involved. We have Otterbear and the Jirachi, who qualified from the LCQ, the last chance qualifier. It'd be really cool to see either of them do well. I digress a little bit, though, as we're hopping on board with Pakigam, a player who didn't fall out of the top 4 once yesterday. Only player to do so. Some players came very close to doing so, 5 out of 6 games with top 4 or better. Paki did that, and that was really impressive. Game number 1 had a 3-star Nico with Jewel Gauntlet, Hextech Gunblade, and the Vanguard's Curious, which is the Vanguard spat. A 3-star Nautilus with a Shojin and Hodge, and got 8th place.
How is that an 8th? I mean, he must have just gotten online, really late or had crazy matchup RNG or fight RNG, because that is a board that you look at and you say, what? This is capable of winning lobbies. In fact, I think he won a lobby with essentially exactly that board yesterday. So, that's disappointing for sure to kind of reach the maximum power level of that composition and wind up finishing 8th. But you know what? You got to shake it off. He's obviously an incredibly capable player. We've been talking a little bit about the narrow end of the flexibility tree, and Pocky is the opposite, right? He played reroll twice yesterday. He won a lobby on Nico with 3-cost carry, and then he had a few different 4-cost carry games, a couple Slayer games, and playing 1 KO game as well. So he has proven that he is capable of playing literally whatever the game gives to him, whether it's an early rolling or it's fast aiding, right? He is a really, really strong and versatile player. So I'm expecting a bounce back game here.
Yeah, I think that it's like you said, it's an anomaly. Those aren't going to be 8th places very often. However, I will remind you about some of our private conversations where I ask you, how is this an 8th place? And I've asked you that about 2 or 3 times when I posted a Nico 3 board, which looked really good. And you said that shouldn't be an 8th place. And I feel like we're having deja vu with that exact same conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe that comp is just susceptible to it, which makes sense given that, Nico has, it's not exactly a very consistent ability cast, which he gets a 3-star. And there's also some tough matchups if people have Kale on the opposite side. Kale never gets hit. maybe she gets hit with her Divine Activate, so there's not a lot of damage going on her, and then she just wipes your board by the time you get the next cast on. So there could be a bunch of different reasons, and I love that there's a Nico in the shop to even kind of remind Pocky of what happened last game.
Yeah, he's like, I'm passing that unit, Dan. That is not one of the droids that I'm looking for right now. And it makes sense, right? He's got the upgraded brawlers in Maokai and Tahm Kench. He also finds an incredibly early Shyvana. He has a bow as well. So, I would be leaning towards the brawler tree from this spot. If he can find a cloak and get a Runaan's Hurricane onto Shyvana, it is such a powerful unit. It basically doubles the damage, Dan.
Yeah, very much so. Pocky, one of the 2 players who are currently streaking alongside Spencer. We've, talked a little bit about Spencer and how he's pretty much embodied the first Wraith mentality going into D #1. 2 8th places, 2 first places. A very close call for him to qualify at the end. And we'll see if Pocky and him could jockey for that #1 spot in this position, as it does seem like he will have his choice between the 2 tiers. Wants the tier that costs a little bit more. Seems going to be the case. His items are so awkward, though. It feels like you have a lot of components, but not a lot of good slams, having 2 tiers, a vest, and a bow. So when you're in a position you want to win streak from here, what would you end up doing here, Bryce?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? Because he wasn't interested in slamming any of these items before. These items not very good early game items. The Static Shiv, the Titans on a backline carry. Frozen Heart, certainly not an item you see built very often. So the only thing he can really think about now is blue buff. Blue buff is in a tough spot. It's been one of the better items in previous iterations of the set. We saw, for example, Riven using blue buff incredibly well. Kane liked blue buff. But there aren't a lot of great blue buff holders in 4.5, so the item has severely decreased in popularity. That being said, he's going up against Chess Mage's board. Chess Mage clearly very strong as well, so he really does want to try to win here, but I'm just not sure it's in the cards, Dan.
Yeah, and that Nasus is just not dying and just going to continue to wither away everybody on the board, so it does seem like Chess Mage is going to get this win. I do want to say that the items are forming to be a really nice Akali build, because you get the ability to perhaps pick up another bow, and all of a sudden you have 2 of the 3 really core items on her, which is Rapid Fire Cannon and blue buff. So that is a possibility, but we will see if that's what ends up Pocky ends up getting, because first the items have to get into place, and usually you only make that decision if you find a really powerful Chosen, like Chosen Akali, in order to make that decision.
Yeah, and I also think blue buff has kind of decreased a little bit in necessity on Akali. So, certainly something he's open to from there. If he rolls down on 3-2 and finds Chosen Akali, I would absolutely make the pivot. We get to look at Pocky's board from the other side as he's going up against Spencer. Pocky just had his win streak broken. He would really, really like to break Spencer's streak. We haven't gotten a chance to talk about it yet, Dan, but streaking into the first neutral round Krugs is a really big deal, because you get the extra interest gold from maintaining that streak. You get it again on the Krugs round. Makes it very easy to make 40 in the round after this, make 40 gold and get the extra interest that comes from that. But it's not happening. It's not meant to be here, as it takes a loss. He looks at a very early Garen 3. Not a unit we see get 3-starred all that often, but Hobo is a very unorthodox player. One of the more fun people in the field, Dan. There are some crazy boards, right, that we've seen this man assemble.
Yeah, I think that overall you start to see the impact of that goal just by the fact that he's not at 30 and going to 40, and he's just going to have to play with significantly less, and that's why that streak snap is really important. Finds a spatula, which, with that rod already has the ability to think about going fully into the Dragon Soul tree, which is particularly interesting from this perspective. And Spencer even hovering over the Dragon Soul trait. I love when players do that, because they sure like, wait, which Dragon Souls am I missing? Or like, what's accessible at this tier at level 5?
Yeah, absolutely. He was kind of deciding between the Brawler tree and the Dragon Soul tree, so it was tough to have to sell that Vi and that Nunu, right? Because it'd be very good for Brawlers. Meanwhile, he's scouting around. I love Spencer. He gives us the zoom all the time. Really gets up close and personal. And you know what? As is always the case, when you scout someone's board and see a ridiculously early powerful unit like a Sivir 2 on 3-1, for example, you'll wind up playing that board, right? Then it always feels like it's just kind of faded, right, Dan?
Yeah, totally. It just feels like that's what's going to happen. Just Mage ends up getting that victory. And that's going to be a continued win streak. DQA also joining the upper ranks here in terms of the streak. And now this is kind of an interesting moment, which is how much will Spencer roll? He's actually known for rolling a lot and very quickly, but he already has his Chosen, and he's not selling it. He's just looking what looks like to be for more Dragon Soul units.
Yeah, I think he's trying to get that Dragon Soul, 6 synergy online along with a Shyvana 2 if he can get it. It's an interesting spot, right? Because he has the spat available to him, he's looking for very cheap units, right? You're talking about looking at the units he's likely to get. Of course, he can get the 4-cost A-Soul and Olaf in the spot, but he can also get Brand or Tristana in order to get it online. Unfortunately for him, Aegon has 9 copies of that Brand that he's looking for, so a little bit harder to find than it would normally be.
Yeah, and this seems like everyone has some kind of big power spike right now as Aegon finds that 3-star Twisted Fate. Not going to be enough to stabilize. Actually, we saw Aegon do a build like this where he was re-rolling Twisted Fate and Brand yesterday in day number 1. He also didn't get top 4. He narrowly missed at 5th, but it definitely was something that was interesting to think about. As we haven't seen too much mage reroll in terms of the 1 cost since the days of set 3, where you would reroll with Candyland and try to make Poppy your Chosen with Twisted Fate carry. Is a very interesting build back then. It doesn't seem like that really exists now, and Aegon still hasn't stabilized despite hitting that TF3 at the moment.
I think it was Brand 3 actually, but it's kind of same difference there, right? Trying to play around one of the 1-cost carries and then ultimately level up and see if he can get that Annie 3 online that we talked about earlier, such a powerful tank in that composition. DQA, meanwhile, playing a more standard approach, if you will, not re-rolling. He's already slammed the RFC, Dan, so I imagine he is leaning towards Kayle from this. DQA really likes to play Kayle. He actually favors Kayle more than most of the field, right? Yesterday, I think he had 3 different Kayle games, actually 4 Kayle games and 2 Slayer games. So, most people when they're going 4-cost carries are playing towards the Slayer tree, DQA favoring the Kayle tree instead. I think it's a very interesting decision. When you have the RFC online early, Kayle does become an extra powerful unit into Slayers, right? You can stay at range against these melee carries that Slayers are often putting out there. I think grabbing the tier there really kind of cements it, Dan. I think he's going to slam a Chalice and he's full committed to Kayle from the situation. Is there anything else you think he can play from here, or is it just Kayle all the way?
When I have Chalices, I do think that if you find a Chosen Aurelion Soul, you can make anything work with it. But Rapid Fire Cannon does make me feel like that is less likely, unless he finds a Reforger of some kind. He does, and he has the ability. Wow, actually, he has a couple of interesting choices at this point, because Quicksilver is also a really important item for Kayle in certain lobbies, especially ones that have Aatrox. So he was thinking about Slam the Hand of Justice, but instead going to prioritize that Hodge for now. And I like the rod here just to get that extra damage, which I can agree with. I think those kind of defensive items, you don't really need them right now in stage 3, but they're so important in core to the stage 4 and 5 battles that I feel like it's going to be a good slam regardless.
Yep, absolutely. And he goes up against Kyun's board. Always a little bit of a feel bads man situation, right? Where, he's just slammed items that completely commit him into the Kayle tree. And he goes up against Kyun, who is basically already done the exact same thing. He's got that Chosen Kindred early, who is holding incredible Kayle items in the RFC, the Ginsu's Rageblade, and the QSS. It's the exact same thing DQA has, minus a bow, but DQA able to get that very important win as we swap over to Kyun's board, and we see why. The Force Spirit trait is quite good early, but just doesn't quite have some of the same power that DQA had on his board, right? DQA had the Keeper buff. He also had 3 Cultists in, which was adding a lot of value. This board really looks kind of like a one-hit wonder, right? It is really just a Kindred on this board, Dan.
Yeah, the Kindred has Tom Kench 2 with the rod as the best form of defense and tank stats. Looks like Kyun may have identified a way that he could have improved his board further by having the Nunu instead of the 1-star Shyvana. That's okay. It doesn't seem like it's going to cost him here, as he's going to be able to get that win over Chess Mage. And now we roll into the end of stage 3. We're going to do a little bit of an inventory check, as Aegon does have what seems to be a stabilization point with that 3-star brand. Thank you for that correction. And at this point for Kiyun, he's going to have to try and roll stabilize. He doesn't have that HP lead that feels really comfortable. And so this is definitely one of those situations here, Bryce. You know, are you keeping this Kindred Chosen or are you selling it? And he is going to choose to sell it right now.
Yeah, it's a really tough spot. So I think that the Nico's help might be the difference maker here, where he thinks he's more likely to be able to get this online. He's also holding ninja units, Dan, which suggests that he is not just playing KO, he is willing to play ninjas from the spot. A very interesting thing. Not everyone is open to ninjas right now, but I know you love Zed, so I have to give you the floor. Sell us on it, Dan. Why is Zed a good option in this situation?
I mean, he's got really good items for it. The most important thing is rapid fire cannon and the Quicksilver. You don't really necessarily need the Rage Blade, although it's certainly not a bad item onto him. And he's finding more Zeds and he's finding more ninjas. And what he's not finding are the 4-cost carries. He sees a Chosen Akali. And now it's decision-making time here for Kiyun. As you can see, a little bit of temporary freeze up. He's not entirely sure if he wants to commit to it. So he's just going to go ahead, prioritize this 2-star Sivir as his temporary carry until he figures out if he really wants this or not. And ends up selling that 2-star Zed, which makes me think that he's not going to do it. And perhaps instead just going to lean on this Sivir and hope that he can find KO eventually.
Yeah, it's just so awkward, right? Because the Akali, if you had a glove, I think you could just play Akali from here, right? You'd have, as you were talking about earlier, the Runins or the RFC and the Infinity Edge, which are both so powerful. We see him use his Reforger now. He gets another cloak. Definitely not what he was hoping for in that situation. It's just tough because you're not likely to find a bunch of KOs while rolling down at 7, right? It's a composition you really, generally speaking, want to roll for at 8, if at all possible. And if he plays this Sivir from here, like, he could take this Chosen, Dan, but I think it's a pass. I think this is a bait, Dan. I really do, because with no Last Whisper on your Sivir, you're going to have too much trouble getting through these Vanguard front lines that are so prominent right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's still going to be a problem regardless of whether or not he has a Chosen or not of Sivir. You can see Kiyun kind of floundering about a little bit. Doesn't seem like he feels very stable in his own right, and going up against Aegon's board, who has hit 7. Looks like he's powering up since he hit his 3-star carry, and now trying to see if he can just power level from this point. And the Brand, you know, every time we see Brand, you know, really cash in on these mages and having 3-star with Gunblade and some damage items, he ends up doing a lot of work. So I'm really impressed by seeing how well that Brand has stabilized him. Oh, interesting. A Chosen Irelia with another Irelia in the shop. I don't think that's good enough either, given that he's still looking for a definitive carry at this point. And at this current pace here, Bryce, this is looking like he might be the first player exiting this lobby.
Yeah, this game feels pretty doomed, Dan. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, he finds a Kale. That is instantly better. He also has given himself a really nice out where, as guaranteed to be last HP going into the next carousel. If there is a KO on that carousel, Dan, we will see him take it. Absolutely, Nico it, get a 2-star carry online, but he's going up against Pocky, who is playing the ninja-based composition. He has not 1 but 2 assassin stats, Dan.
Yeah, that's right. And he's given one of them to Kennen and one of them to Zed. Every ninja except for Shen has become an assassin. And so, you know, I guess Pocky got able to hit very easily the 6 assassin trait and the ninjas. Usually it's a little bit difficult to get both of those stretch trait goals at the same time, but he's able to do it. Now back over to Kiyun. Does he have the Kale on the carousel? It does not. And that's brutal. Can pick up this belt if he wants to make a Zeke, so he can continue to buff the attack speed of Kale much earlier and get her ramping that much quicker. But this is looking really bad. At this point, Kiyun is praying that he can somehow squeeze a 7th place.
Yeah. We were talking about turning an 8th into a 7th here, and that is absolutely his mission. He is essentially 30 HP clear of the 7th place person in 8th. Not a lot of outs, to be honest with you, Dan, right? He really needs to find another Kale so that he can use this Nico's help. It will be a gigantic spike, especially along with this Zeke's Herald, which is one of the most powerful items. You know, Kale is stacking attack speed as a result of this Ginsu's Rage Blade, so she really gets a lot of value generated out of having the Zeke's Herald. He's just rolling. He just doesn't have a lot of things he can get. You see him constantly looking at these Chosens. There just aren't a lot of Chosens for him to hit, to be honest with you, Dan, right? I mean, you know, we saw him pass on an Aurelia, which maybe would have been interesting. This is pretty good. Okay, so it gives him 4 Divine trait online. I think, and you know, I've talked about this a little bit, I think it's an underrated trait, right? I think 4 Divine has a meaningful amount of power in it. Unfortunately, he has to sell this Shin in order to be able to upgrade this Aya. He just needs strength on his board somehow, some way. So he has improved meaningfully,
no.
Still hasn't found the KL2. He's going up against Kiting, who is level 8, has a 2-star Olaf, Dan.
2-star Chosen Olaf with the Deathblade. No Ruined Hurricane, though, and you can see why it's considered to be a rough matchup. 1-star Kale at level 7. Better than the 2-star Chosen Olaf. And you can see Kiyun typing his strategy, which is just donkey roll for the KL2 and hope that his Nikos can finish it off here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I was talking about, you know, potentially KO rising in power again today with so many Slayer players. That melee carry really does struggle into the RFC. Meanwhile, he flips over to DQA's board. The 17-year-old Wiz kid just hit, right? I mean, he goes to level 8. He finds the exact Chosen he is looking for. He has the same really strong items on his KO, but his is Chosen, so it's 2-starred. It's also 4 Executioner, which is such a powerful trait. We duck over to Aegon's board. Aegon with the 7 mages online. It looks to me like he is slow rolling here, Dan. He's trying to get that Annie 3-star. We obviously saw the power of that last game in Scramblin'. Kiting coming up against this board. He does kill the Annie, right? A 2-star Annie, much easier to kill than 1-star. And he is slowly but surely running down this mage comp. He cannot CC that anymore, so he is essentially immune to Bran, getting the win. Aegon not in a great spot either. Maybe slightly better than Kiyun, but still not good.
Yeah, very difficult for Aegon to try and stabilize if he's not going to hit that Annie 3, and he's invested a lot of gold. It looks like when he's slow rolling, which means that even if he hits Annie, if he doesn't have enough gold to level to 8, he still might be in a situation where he's just too far behind the power curve. You know, if you're talking about what TFT can, you know, be from the 30,000 foot view, which is, you know, how big is your army number wise? And it doesn't seem like his army is super big outside of that brand. He's got a 2-star Annie trying to hold off the waves of Olafs and Kales that are wailing away. Not to mention that he's also clumped because he wants to keep his mages safe and maximize his value. And that does increase the likelihood that he gets wiped by a big sweeping AoE outside of the Aurelion Soul in the corner.
Yeah, he did get offered some very good components. He's finding Annies now. Wow, okay. These were a series of hits, Dan. We were talking about, you know, is he going to hit enough to be able to go levels when he does hit? And the answer is clearly yes. I think he's going to reforge this bow, right? There's so much value he can get out of these other 3 components on his Aurelion Soul, as long as he doesn't get, like, a cloak here. I guess you can slam the Chalice. It's not the end of the world, right? You slam the Chalice. You have a Jeweled Gauntlet left over for your A-Soul, so you've got a secondary carry. He's going up against Hobos, who has a very unconventional board. Warlord, not a popular comp at all in the tournament or on ladder, but he does have this Garen 3. Katarina is into the backline. Can it 100-0 this brand, Stan?
It cannot, apparently. I wonder if that stun ended up costing the ability to do so, and now Hobos takes that loss, and that's got to be a big relief point here. I can't even really speak right now. Aegon, he was at 7, and he's actually not even committing to the full level 8 just yet, and yet he was going up against level 8 boards and still able to stabilize. But it's going to continue to get worse here as you start to scout and you see the Chosen Kales, the Chosen Aurelion Soul, the Chosen Olafs. These are the definitive 4-cost carries that are pretty much shaping the entire meta, and it's really tricky for Aegon, who's just kind of going with some backline swaps to try and maximize the amount of damage that he can do and keep his brand safe. And Chess Mage, you know, he's positioned to snipe that Aurelion Soul, so that ends up being pretty good for Aegon because his main damage is Brand. And the Annie is still staying alive, so maybe he can actually do this and win the Mage battle. Things are looking good for Aegon.
Yeah, such a greedy play from Aegon to not level in that situation. He's got a Yuumi 2, a very powerful unit, just sitting on his bench, you know, chilling, being a team mascot. He opts not to level 8 on an interval where, like you said, everyone is basically there. He does get very lucky in his matchup. He goes up against a Infinity Edge Olaf into his Bramble Annie. So the Bramble is making sure that she is not being critically struck as a result of the Infinity Edge, basically nullifying that item, and just can't get through the Annie. Ultimately cleans up with the mages. He does choose to level off interval here, Dan, which is, by that I mean he is spending an extra 2 gold to go over, not an equal power of 4. He's playing Spencer's board. Spencer playing a very popular comp from a couple of patches ago. Still good if you get the right conditions for it. He does have the Aurelion Soul 1 with Elder Spat, so not ideal. He also misses the Shroud, but so much power in this Elderwood trade as it is ramping up slowly but surely in the fight, Dan.
Yeah, Brand's trying to capitalize on the amount of time that's being stalled from this Annie, who keeps refusing to die. She's so low in HP, and because of the great job with that stall, Brand is able to do it. All the Brand doubters out there, including myself, Aegon making us look a little bit silly here, just showing how much longevity this Brand has into the game to still put out damage as long as you can stall for it. That 7 mage stretch trade is no joke, dealing out what feels like crazy amounts of damage as long as you stall for it. I am curious to see what item he picks here. You can make a justification for Ionic Spark or even just more defensive stats for Annie. But the Ionic Spark just seems to synergize so well with the magic damage that it feels like that's the pick here.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And good time to play Spencer's board. I think if it was an Aurelion Soul 2 on that board, we might have seen a different fight. But Spencer didn't have it yet. He has it now. He grabs the Aurelion Soul off of the carousel. The question for Aegon is he going to roll more here in order to try to improve his board? Or what is he going to do? He does put in this Ornn, a solid unit, not amazing, but solid in terms of its unit power level. Obviously, the strength of this really, Dan, is in getting the extra items. He's also getting the 3 Elderwood trait online, so nothing to sneeze at there. We go over to Kiting's board. Kiting is playing what I would describe as scuffed Dragon Soul, right? He has the Slayer buff in, which is really good. He does have Tryndamere 2 with somewhat interesting items, right? Dragon's Claw and Hodge, very good. No Runins, no Last Whisper on the Olaf, but no problem, I guess, as this Olaf is slowly ramping up. Nope, never mind. I speak too soon. The Brand lives with 1 HP, gets another cast off, and just deletes what is remaining of Kiting's board.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the Death Cap Tryndamere and reflecting upon all my Summoner's Rift games where some of my Tryndameres in the top lane were doing stuff like that. So, good times. AP Tryndamere apparently is the wave. As Kiting doesn't have the best items, but he's trying to make do with what he can. He ends up rolling, finding a Samira, number 2 in the shop. Still not going to be enough to help him stabilize, it feels like, given that currently his Olaf is the one holding those items. It's almost to the point where it makes me contemplate whether or not it's worth just transferring items onto Samira if he finds Samira 2 instead of this Olaf, despite it being chosen. But he might not get the opportunity. He's going against Pocky, who has that Akali 3, wailing away, has the rapid fire cannon, the Hand of Justice, still even having an item slot free, and Kiting takes a bad loss, and that's going to be an exit into the bottom 4. The question is, does he have an opportunity to salvage it? If Spencer takes a nasty loss, maybe instead he gets a 6th. But it doesn't seem to be the case here, as Spencer is going to get that win. Wow, chosen Olaf, 2-star Tryndamere, 2 Samiras with 2 Death Blades, Hand of Justice, and yes, even the Death Cap. Actually, the Dragon Claw is pretty good on Tryndamere. That does not feel like a 7th place to me either, Bryce. These are some very surprising results for some strong boards.
Yeah, a little bit scuffed on his items, right? Like some generic power to them, but definitely didn't have either, kind of 2 carries with good but not great items, and a lot of bad matchups for him, right? As we saw, for example, him running into like the Bramblefest Annie that he just could not kill. We hop over onto Hobo's board. Hobo's playing composition that I mentioned earlier, not very popular right now. He's not at the peak power level of this comp yet, Dan. He really, he has Katarina 2. He's really only able to go for that. Katarina 3, really a necessary condition for this comp to win lobbies. So I think he's just trying to get into the top 4 if at all possible. He does have a somewhat unusual version of this. He's got a Garen 3. He also has a Set 2. This is one of those times you really wish you had a magnetic remover, Dan, because the Warlord buff on Set is incredibly powerful. It's just hard to justify selling an Aatrox 2. So much power of his boards in that Aatrox as well that while you would like to optimize and move it, it's just sometimes you can't have everything you want, Dan. Apologies, we've got technical difficulties, so I am flying solo for a little bit. I will try to hop in here and do the play-by-play as well, as we see Aegon's board facing off against Hobos. You know, Hobos, as I was talking about, this Katarina 2, just not able to do enough work, right? It gets onto the carry, but it doesn't do enough damage when it ultimates, and the Brand with the Gunblade is able to essentially heal back up to full. So luckily for Hobos, one more player does go out. It's Spencer. Pocky takes a loss on that Akali 3 board, so down to 4 HP as well. Hobos just trying to get in the top 4 here, if at all possible, right? Makes a big difference on the points. Jump an additional 2 points from 5th place to 6th, or from 5th place to 4th place. So you see him sweating out his positioning. He's trying to get to a spot where his Katarina is going to jump on the carry. He's seeing a lot of the enemy carries on the left side, so he opts to put the Katarina on the left side. Let's see if he guessed right, Dan.
Well, he does have the Garen to try intercept the Kali, but the Garen immediately falls. The Kali's just doing too much damage, chopping up all of the back line. And Katarina does do some damage, but not enough, as Pocky with the double assassin spat. Akali 3 is going to sneak into the top 4. We've seen Akali able to get to the top 4 before yesterday, and that's the second time being played. Another top 4 currently. 100% top 4 rate.
Yeah, and we pop over to DQA's board, who has this incredibly powerful KO composition online. He is near peak power for this. He has the exact chosen you want. He has close to, if not the very best items possible on his KO. He has a ton of good quality units in here, you know, essentially 2 stars across the board, except for his legendary units and his Sejuani. So, you know, the 17-year-old kid who's been, you know, top of the ladder for most of this set, Dan, is looking to put in another good performance. He top 3s the first game, and here he is in a good position to win this lobby, facing someone else who's been very strong, Aegon. He does pull in the Brand, Dan, but can he kill it?
Doesn't seem so. DQA takes a loss, and now Aegon is the lobby leader. Pocky out in 4th place. Taking a look at what's available in the carousel, mainly spatula-based items, as well as a Guardian Angel and a blue buff, seems like. Sunfire Cape, not really useful in these kinds of late-game scenarios, and there's already 2 for DQA. So he's going to see what he can do and make magic out of this. I would be surprised to see this KO just out in 3rd place, given that there's a reroll mage comp that's that I would expect the Executioner-based KO to be able to do well against. Finds an opportunity for Yone 2 now in the shop. That's huge.
Yeah, very big spike for him. You know, he's likely to be going against Chess Mage's board. It's worth noting Chess Mage is streaking. We haven't gotten a chance to look at that board overly much yet. Opting to play not 1 but 2 Azirs, doing whatever he can to protect this KO. You know, the Yone 2 will provide a meaningful amount of frontline, so he can afford this trade-off away from the Vanguards. He does face off against Chess Mage's Ghost. Chess Mage has been win streaking, and a very interesting version of this board. He's playing kind of the best of both worlds. He's got the Olaf carry with the Slayers. He also has the Asol carry with the Mages, so it's a Mages Slayers board for Chess Mage. Chess Mage not getting his streak popped by DQA. He does get his streak popped, on the other hand, by Aegon. So a very, very close lobby. You know, we saw Aegon beat the previous version of DQA's board pretty decisively. This is an interesting spot. He winds up having to make his Azir 2, so fewer Sand Soldiers on the board. But he does have 2 Lee Sins in. Now it's a question, can he position them correctly to, for example, kick out this Annie? In that last fight, he did not get a very valuable Lee Sin kick. Annie was able to sit there and tank for days. So he really, really needs to find a way to deal with that if he's going to have a shot at beating that board. You see him swap the Shin in front of that. I am a little surprised to see him not try to kick the Annie, but Aegon very, very wisely says, you know what, I can throw up all of these fodder units in order to make sure that you are not instant kicking my primary source of tankiness. The KO has set off the Divine buff and is just wailing away. Annie not able to cast for a while, does ultimately get the double cast off, and the Brand just blows up the KO in the back line. It's not fatal yet, though, as Chess Mage goes home, so we have our top 2 in Aegon and DQA.
That is ridiculous, just seeing the amount of damage that Brand could put out. Is this reroll comp for real? We knew mages were good, I just didn't really expect to see Brand be the carry. You see a lot of times Vagar going 3-star, Lulu. We saw Aurelion Soul 3 in another lobby, right? That's obviously a very good win condition. It's just that
Yeah.
most people write off Brand.
Yeah, they do, and this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. This composition is being underplayed. Considering how well it has consistently performed in this tournament, it is just not seeing enough play. This is going to be really interesting, right? We're getting the absolute max capped version of the Kayle comp. You have the best case scenario on Chosen. You have a 2-star Lee Sin, 2-star Azir, 2-star Yoni, fully itemized. This is about as powerful as we could possibly ask for Kayle. So if he can't beat this mage board, then this is for sure for real. Aegon does finally get the Aurelion Soul 2 online, which is a really, really big deal. The Shojin goes on to the Lee Sin. What will it get in terms of value on its kicks? Aegon wisely backlines the ante.
Yeah, well, the taunt actually attracts the Lee Sin, so the Lee Sin actually ends up getting there, but it doesn't matter because it ends up wiping anyways, and with Kayle having no more frontline, Aurelion Soul just wipes it. That's going to be the game. Aegon making the comeback with mages. That's the second time we've seen that today as a fully capped